Every country has secrets it would rather you never heard. But some of them, a state will destroy a man to protect. This one belonged to a king, and the man who claimed to know it was about to learn exactly how far the most powerful people in Sweden would go to keep him quiet. They would use doctors, money, exile, prison, the full weight of the law. His name was Kurt Haijby, and this is the story of how a kingdom tried to erase him completely. To understand what happened to him, you have to go back to the spring of 1912. Kurt Haijby was 14 years old, a Boy Scout, selling little paper mayflowers for charity on the streets of Stockholm. That spring, he and another scout were granted an audience with the king himself, Gustav V. And here, we have to be careful, because everything that follows is Haijby's account, his word, never proven in a court, never confirmed by the palace. But this is what he claimed. He claimed that the king made advances toward him that day, that he was just a boy, and that he stayed silent about it for years. Then, 2 decades later, their paths crossed again. By the 1930s, Haijby was a grown man, a restaurant owner in Stockholm, and in November 1933, he was among a small group received by the aging king. According to Haijby, it was then that a relationship began, one that would last about a year. Now picture the world he was living in. In Sweden at that time, a relationship between 2 men was not just a scandal. It was a crime. And this was no ordinary man. This was the king, the living symbol of the nation, on a throne that was supposed to be untouchable. A secret like that, true or not, was radioactive. If it ever surfaced, it could shake the monarchy to its core, which meant powerful people had every reason to make sure Kurt Haijby was never believed. The only question left was how far they were willing to go. At first, they chose the quiet solution: money. Over the years that followed, Kurt Haijby was paid again and again, hush money handed over to keep his mouth shut. And this is not a rumor. Decades later, the royal court itself would admit that the payments were real. But money has a way of never being enough. Haijby kept talking, and a man who keeps talking becomes a problem that has to be solved. So they tried something darker. In 1938, Kurt Haijby was committed to Moberg, one of Stockholm's mental hospitals, because if you can have a man declared insane, then everything he says becomes the raving of a madman. His secret dies with his credibility. There was just one problem. The senior physician who examined him, Dr. Harold Rabe, could find nothing wrong. No illness, no madness. By the doctor's own assessment, Kurt Haijby was perfectly sane. And that December, he was released, officially declared healthy. The psychiatric weapon had failed. So they reached for another, exile. Haijby was pressured into a deal, a monthly payment, in exchange for his signature on a promise to stay silent and to leave Sweden altogether. He emigrated to Germany. And here, the story turns. Because Kurt Haijby was not a man who deserves your sympathy. In Germany, he was convicted of crimes against 2 young boys. Let that be absolutely clear. Whatever was done to him, he was a guilty man, an offender against children. But hold on to this, because it matters. The Swedish state did not destroy Kurt Haijby to protect those children. They had courts for that. Everything they had done to him, the money, the asylum, the exile, was never about justice. It was about a secret and a reputation that had to be protected at any cost. In 1940, Sweden took him back, and Kurt Haijby did not stay quiet. He pressed his claims harder than ever. He wanted recognition. He wanted money. He would not disappear. But the world was changing around him. In 1950, King Gustav V died, 92 years old, and with him went any chance of ever answering the question at the heart of it all. The one man who knew the truth, whatever it was now beyond every court, every question, every consequence, forever. That same year, a new word was born in the Swedish press. Rättsrota, legal rot. Suddenly, the whole country was talking about corruption and abuse of power in the highest offices of the land. And then Kurt Haijby's cause found an unlikely champion, Vilhelm Moberg, one of the most beloved writers in the nation's history, the author who gave Sweden its story of the emigrants. Moberg did not defend Haijby the man. He defended a principle. He looked at the payments, the asylum, the forced exile, and he saw a state that had bent its own laws to crush an inconvenient citizen, and he refused to let it stay buried. He took it to the public, lecture halls across the country, article after article. He dragged the secret machinery into daylight and forced a nation to look at it. So how did the Swedish state respond to being exposed? It did not put itself on trial. It put Haijby on trial. In 1952, Kurt Haijby was convicted, not of lying, of extortion, of blackmailing the royal court. He was sentenced to 8 years of hard labor. On appeal, 6. Think about what that means. The court never ruled on whether his secret was true, only that he had used it as a weapon, and with a single verdict, the man was branded a criminal, and his story was buried beneath his conviction, permanently. And he was not the only one crushed in those years. The same panic swept up others. A government minister, Niels Kvenzel, was publicly accused of belonging to a secret homosexual league. The accusation was later judged completely false. It didn't matter. His name was already destroyed. He was forced from office, and an entire minority, gay men across Sweden, watched their existence turned into a national scandal, a thing to be feared, to be hunted. The damage to their fight for basic dignity would last for decades. Kurt Haijby was not a good man. Remember that. He was a convicted criminal, guilty of crimes that deserve no defense, but that was never the point. The point is what a state will do when its reputation is threatened. It reached for a doctor. To call a sane man mad, it reached for money, to buy his silence. It reached for the border, to send him away. And when all of that failed, it reached for a courtroom, to brand him and bury him. Not one person in power ever paid a price. The king died in his palace, untouched. The officials kept their posts. Only Haijby and the innocent people caught in the panic were left in the wreckage. Kurt Haijby died in 1965, discredited, alone. His claim never proven and never disproven. So here is the question we have to leave you with. If a government will do all of this to silence a guilty man, what is it willing to do to silence an innocent one? The king's secret was buried with him, but it was not the only secret they were keeping. And it would not be the last time the Swedish state decided that the truth was simply too dangerous to survive.